The Russian army continues its offensive in the east and south of Ukraine. Despite significant losses, the Russians managed to achieve certain tactical results. The most difficult area remains Avdiivka, where the Russians are pressing the hardest, achieving tactical success here. Hey, my name is Alex, and this is a quick update on the Russian-Ukrainian war from the perspective of someone living within it. To confirm the colossal losses of the Russian army, here is a table with documented losses on both sides for May 2, 2024, verified by video and photos. If we consider only heavy machinery, Russia lost 40 units in a day, while Ukraine lost 8 units, a ratio of 1 to 5. However, if we count all destroyed machinery for that day without expectation, Russia lost around 100 units, Ukraine 10 units, a ratio of 1 to 10. Nevertheless, such losses are not critical, at least for now, and there is increasing evidence that the Russians are preparing even larger offensive. In his recent address to border guards, Volodymyr Zelensky noted that Russia is preparing to expand its offensive action, and we must do everything to thwart the Russian offensive plan. At the same time, the deputy chief of the Ukrainian intelligence service, Skybitsky, stated in an interview with The Economist that he sees no possibility to Ukraine to win the war alone on the battlefield. Such wars can only end through negotiations. Here are his other notable statements. Ukraine is on the brink. It's as difficult now as ever. A major Russian offensive will begin at the end of May or the beginning of June. Russia will first continue the implementation of the plan to occupy Donetsk and Luhansk regions. The success of the advance will determine when and where the Russians will attack next. Russia is also preparing for an offensive around the Kharkiv and Sumy region in the northeast. Another interview given to the Times was by General Pavlyuk, the commander of the Ukrainian ground forces. Our intelligence service says that Russia does indeed have a plan to take Kharkiv or Sumy, but we do not know how serious these plans are and whether the Russians are capable of implementing them, he says. Pavlyuk's main points echo those of Skybitsky. And now let's move on to the overview of the current situation on the front. On the Svativ front section, the enemy continues its assault actions in Kislivka, attacking near the intersection of Molodizhna and Zelina Street. In Kotlarivka, the enemy has achieved partial success along Polova and Vishneva streets, penetrating up to 480 meters deep. Advancement is also noted south of the settlement, Siversky direction. Moderate intensity combat actions continue, no change reported. Drone operators of the 81st Separate Airborne Brigade continue to target Russian armored vehicles, positions and personnel near the village of Bilogorivka. This footage demonstrates the effective work of FPV operators in destroying Russian T-64BV tank, possibly formerly Ukrainian one. One drone disrupts the net, while another strikes the tank, leading to its detonation. This is the same front area. Meanwhile, Ukrainian armed forces have defeated yet another Russian assault group near Spine on the same front, Chasiv Yar section. High-intensity combat operation persists on the eastern outskirts of Chasiv Yar and near Styupki-Olyubovsky 2nd Reserve. Chasiv Yar and the entire Chasiv Yar community still have 682 residents, compared to around 13,000 before the war. These are ordinary people, residents of the community, who have remained here despite the ongoing military actions, which are essentially taking place at the city's border. Near the city, the situation remains challenging as the enemy continues attempts to enter the city. Although the past week have seen stability in terms of changes in the line of contact in this area. In video footage, the 41st Mechanized Brigade, rarely seen, engaged enemy infantry and equipment with mortar fire and artillery on the eastern outskirts of Chasiv Yar. Artillery unit of the Tsunami Assault Regiment of the National Police Fury Brigade strike enemy positions, armored vehicles and personnel using lightweight 105mm M101 howitzers. A certain quantity of such howitzers have been provided to Ukraine by Lithuania. These American howitzers, dating back to the Second World War, have been in production since 1941. Lastly, a Russian tactic observed is the use of chicken hen protective cages, as seen in recent morning assault around Avdiivka. Russians are attempting to employ this tactic utilizing tanks garages across the front. The primary purpose of such equipment is to swiftly transport infantry to landing sites. To counter it, Ukraine requires more well-prepared ATGMs, drones and mines. On the Avdiivka direction, after the capture of Novokalinovo and Keramika, the Russians advanced towards the central part of Arkhangelsk, occupying an area up to 3.8 kilometers wide and 2 kilometers deep. North of Ocheretino, Russian forces advanced on a front up to 1.7 kilometers wide and 1.2 kilometers deep, occupying Dacha territories. East of Novo-Alexandriivka, the enemy has achieved partial success along three tree lines on a front up to 1.6 kilometers wide and 500 meters deep. Fighters of the Yasny Ochi unit of the 23rd Separate Mountain Battalion continue to hunt Russians in the Ocheretino area. It can be noticed that the enemy's main force in this area is infantry, which moves like zombies among plantings, trenches, hides under vehicles, etc. However, Ukrainian fighters also do not allow them to do this peacefully, hunting down them with FPV drones. Unfortunately, there has been some Russian progress observed, and the situation remains challenging. Also, warriors of the 47th Separate Mountain Battalion Magura share a video of repelling another attempt of a Russian assault supported by armored vehicles, resulting in the destruction of 7 enemy vehicles in the same area. This video captures the annihilation of a deserted Russian BMP-1 on the road towards Novobakhmutivka. Meanwhile, Russians complain about a Bradley near the settlement of Solovyovo. It is worth noting that American Bradleys have proven their effectiveness in this war. Ukrainian soldiers praise this machine, while the Russians fear it. The Russian army's attempts to push continue across all fronts in the Avdiivka direction. Farther south on the map, in the same Avdiivka direction, battles are taking place in Netailove and south of Pervomaysk. South of Pervomaysk, the enemy has occupied the territory of abandoned Ochits and advanced towards the Domaha ravine on a front up to 1.4 kilometers wide and 1.5 kilometers deep. Kurachiv direction. On this front, Russians have learned something. They no longer conduct assaults with use of armor. Instead, for the past 3 or 4 days towards Georgiivka, they have been conducting something akin to reconnaissance by fire, advancing on golf carts. However, Ukrainian defense forces are effectively countering them with FPV drones, and it all culminates in airstrikes conducted by drones. Main efforts are primarily directed towards Pobyeda. In the Novomikhailivka area, the enemy attempt to break through to Paraskivka. Fighters of the 79th Separate Assault Battalion repelled the attack, inflicting the fire damage on the enemy's armored vehicles and personnel. Velikonovoselivsky direction. In Uruzhaine, the enemy managed to consolidate in the southern part of the settlement, occupying territories of the farm and the agriculture machinery yard. On the front up to 1.2 kilometers wide and 600 meters deep. Active combat actions continue. The defense of Eurozone is carried out by the forces of the 58th Brigade, the Separate Presidential Brigade, the 762nd State Special Transport Service Protection Brigade, and other units. For the third week in a row, the Russians have set the southern direction ablaze. Currently, no front has as many active actions as Donetsk does. Footage of Javelin operations is emerging. Here is an example from the southern outskirts of Eurozone. This may indicate that assistance from the west is beginning to arrive, although this could still be Ukrainian supplies that have been activated, knowing that assistance is on the way. Robotine sector. Attempts by the Russians to capture the ruins of Robotine continue. In the video, a Russian's BMP or MTLB is detonated on an anti-tank mine in the area of this settlement. It is evident that the mine detonation occurred second after the infantry disembarked. Another failed nighttime attempt by the Russians to carry out infantry disembarkation for subsequent assault action in the direction of Zaporizhia. As a result, the Russians' MTLB was blown up by a mine, and the infantry was destroyed by strike drones. Video from the fighters of the 3rd Operational Brigade's Patron. On the rest of the front line, the situation remains unchanged. There is a systematic destruction of Russia's air defense system by Ukrainian defense forces recorded. It has been recorded that the launch and charge installation of the Russian Buk complex was destroyed in the Kursk region, Russia. As a result of the strike, the launch and charge installation with 6 missiles was destroyed, and the firing installation of the Buk M1 complex was damaged. Meanwhile, satellite images of the Jankoy airfield in occupied Crimea have been released after a missile strike by Ukrainian defense forces. In the images taken on May 1st, it is noticeable that another one air defense system has been destroyed. Other anti-aircraft fire installations visible in the image from April 27th have been relocated. It is also noticeable that the Russians have again constructed caponniers for their air defense systems at this airfield. They are trying to protect themselves from ATACMS missiles, which is logical since the devastation of Jankoy from air defense systems opens up significant prospects for further operation in Crimea, and they cannot afford to leave such a gap in the defense of the peninsula. The Russians are destroying things as well, as this is a war and both sides suffer losses. The problem is the Russians are not discriminating with their targets. For instance, recently they launched a missile strike on a postal depot in the city of Odessa. At the time of the missile hit, the depot contained 900 shipments. Orders from online stores for clothing, electronics, toys, pet treats, medicine, care packages for loved ones, etc., totaling 5.5 tons. But according to the Russians, weapons were stored there, of course. Well, Ukraine is facing tough trials, but we have heard stories about taking Kyiv in 3 days before. So, premature conclusions should not be drawn here either. If Ukraine managed to conduct mobilization effectively, which requires changing approaches, it can succeed. In other directions, things are not so bad. Help is on its way. The arrival of F-16 aircraft expected. According to the latest news, a significant amount of work is currently underway to adapt highly accurate French AASM Hammer glide bombs with jet engines to F-16 fighters, which will be supplied to Ukraine. And here is a photo of similar US-supplied GDAM extend-range glide bombs in Ukraine service, seen here on a highly modified MiG-29 fulcrum weapon station. Therefore, there are no signs of Ukraine surrendering. So, that wraps up today's video. If you found this information helpful or somehow insightful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.